Hello there, you're watching our television. This is State of Business. I am Pamula Katukampala. Let's have a look at the headlines. Nation experiences deceleration in the money printing trend. China offers Sri Lanka a 2-year debt moratorium. Welcome back here with State of Business. Now let's have a detailed look at today's stories. The Central Bank of Sri Lanka held its first monetary policy review for the year yesterday. During its press briefing, Governor of the Central Bank, Dr. Nandalal Veerasinghe, commented on liquidity in the banking sector.
Now, these term repos are offered mainly to address short-term liquidity, not on a similar kind of maturity. It's much shorter maturities that we offer term repos. This is as a result of the restriction they imposed recently. Rather than relying on the day-to-day overnight at 15.5 for some banks, those are in deposit, encourage them to have a little longer-term permanent basis liquidity so that liquidity situation will be improved, and as a result, that will also certainly help overall market interest rates to come down. For example, when banks are running liquidity deficits, and they themselves have a tendency to compete against each other for deposits. That will not help bring down the deposit rates in the short term. I think this measure basically would achieve several objectives. One is to help bring down the market rates over a period of time on a gradual basis, faster rates, and also address the liquidity situation in the short term. And obviously, the investing in treasury bills is a different. What we see is not banks who are investing in treasury bills now. There are broader investor community, and if you compare the arbitrage, what you mentioned is much lower than compared to 15.5% daily basis. Now they have to raise at the market. It's a market determined rate that they raise on the basis of auctions. So I think I don't see a problem with that.
And speaking further during the press briefing, Governor Veerasinghe stressed that the trend on money printing points towards a deceleration.
I'm not quite sure what does that mean. When we look at the recent, I think, data, probably I think Dr. Arishchandra can share the information. In terms of amount of the reserve money expansion by the central bank, which is in proper terms what is called money printing, has been accelerating. And also the direct contributions, so subscription to bill auctions, if you all know information. Last several weeks we have been raising full amounts from the markets without central bank subscribing. That's one way of increasing reserve money that we have curtailed that part as well. Now this is where still rates are coming down in the environment rates are coming down, and the ability to raise almost 100% from the market shows that there has been no significant trend in increasing what we call the monetary expansion by the central bank. I have not seen the comment. These are the facts.
Meanwhile, Governor Veerasinghe also elaborated on the financial assurance presented to the International Monetary Fund by India, as well as efforts by other bilateral creditors.
There, all I can say, as already the public domain, India has clearly given financial assurances which is acceptable to the International Monetary Fund. That is very clear. It's very clear. It's all public domain, which has all the necessary assurances in that letter. So I think we first of all we should thank Indian authorities for issuing that letter in the first place. Secondly, the other bilateral creditors, the Paris Club and China, and some other small bilateral creditors are also in the process of issuing financial assurances. There have been a lot of very significant communications that has been happening between the IMF, between the Paris Club and other non-Paris Club members, and also with the Minister of Finance. That basically that process is making a very good progress. This is where we think, in fact, the issuing financial assurance is a matter between the creditors and the IMF. So what is expected is that creditors will issue this letter to the IMF in line with their debt targets. Then IMF will have to look at it and make a decision. These assurances are sufficient for them to go ahead with the IMF board approval. They are in this process. There has been a very constructive engagement and discussion going on even right now. And as a result, we hope that we would be able to, IMF would be able to receive necessary financing assurance from all the creditors in a very short period.
See you soon with more stories after this short commercial break. Welcome back, you're watching State of Business. Now, it's been reported that the Export-Import Bank of China has offered Sri Lanka a 2-year moratorium on its debt. China is to support the country's efforts to secure a $2.9 billion loan from the International Monetary Fund. Regional rivals China and India are the biggest bilateral lenders to Sri Lanka. India wrote to the IMF earlier this month saying it would commit to supporting Sri Lanka with financing and debt relief, but the government also needs the backing of China in order to reach a financial agreement with the global lender. However, a letter stating that China's Exim Bank would extend the debt service due in 2022 and 2023 as an immediate contingency measure is not viewed as sufficient to the IMF's approval for the critical loan. The Chinese Exim Bank seeks to expedite the negotiation process on medium and long-term debt treatment. By end 2020, Sri Lanka owed China's Exim Bank $2.83 billion according to IMF data. In total, Sri Lanka owed Chinese lenders $7.4 billion, or nearly a fifth of public external debt by end 2022, calculations by the China-Africa Research Initiative showed. China's Exim Bank later holds that the bank will support Sri Lanka in its application of the IMF Extended Fund Facility to help relieve the liquidity strain. An IMF spokesperson confirmed that IMF's management received India's commitment but did not comment on the Chinese letter. Meanwhile, India said last week that the financing or debt relief provided by Export-Import Bank of India would be consistent with restoring debt sustainability under the IMF-supported program. India did so in a letter directly addressed to the International Monetary Fund. It is expected that the government would likely share China's letter with the IMF and seek their opinion on its contents to gauge if stronger assurances were needed. It has been highlighted that when comparing the letters, India's was shown to be comprehensive in acknowledging debt restructuring parameters from the IMF for middle-income countries such as Sri Lanka. Meanwhile, China's letter only points to a rebuilding of foreign exchange reserves being key for Sri Lanka without referencing ratios for debt and financing needs. Whether the letter furnished by China is accepted by the IMF is a matter that will be followed closely by all private creditors. It is unclear that debt relief major lenders such as China, the world's largest bilateral lender, and India are willing to make further down the line. Western countries such as the United States and multilateral lenders are pressing Beijing to offer debt relief to emerging economies in distress and have criticized Beijing for slow progress. The head of the International Monetary Fund, Kristalina Georgieva, recently said the lender had reached an understanding in principle with China about a debt restructuring strategy. China will de facto accept net present value reduction on the basis of significant stretching of the maturities and reduction of interest. Governor of the Central Bank of Sri Lanka, Nandalal Veerasinghe, recently expressed that the country hoped to complete its debt restructuring in 6 months. Now, the renewable energy sector holds that it is the only path to fulfill the pledge made by President Ranil Wickremesinghe at the 27th session of the Conference of the Parties of the UNFCCC. Secretary to the Small Hydropower Association, Varna Dahanayaka, warned that failing to support the sector will erode power and energy security. This matter was discussed during a recent joint press conference by groups representing the renewable energy sector.
අපේ රටේ ගරු ජනාධිපතිතුමා COP27 කියන සමුළුවට සහභාගී වුණා නොවැම්බර් මාසේ 8 වෙනිදා. එතුමා ඒ කරපු කතාවේදී පැහැදිලිවම කිව්වා ලංකාවේ බලශක්තිය 70%ක් දක්වා වැඩි කරන්න එතුමා ප්‍රතිඥාවක් දීලා තියෙනවා. ඒතර අපි කියන්නේ ජාත්‍යන්තර ඉදිරියේ COP27 ගිවිසුම ප්‍රකාරව අපේ රටේ ගරු ජනාධිපතිතුමා කියලා තිනවා මේ රටේ බලශක්තිය 70%කට වැඩි කරන්න සහ කාබන් භාවිතය 14%ක් දක්වා 2030 දී අඩු කරන්න. තුන්වෙනි වැදගත්ම කාරණේ තමයි එතුමා කියනවා මේ රටවල් එකතු කරලා අපිට පුනර්ජනන බලශක්ති ප්‍රභාව සංවර්ධකරුවන්ට අඩු මිලට මුදල් ලබා දීමේ අවශ්‍යතාවය කල්පනා කරන අවශ්‍යතාවය රටවල්ට එකතු කරලා මේක කරන්න කියලා. तर IMF එකේ එන්නේ ඉස්සෙල්ලා අපිට යම්මාකාර ජාත්‍යන්තර බැඳීමක් COP27 හරහා අපි දීලා තියෙනවා මේ රටේ පුනර්ජනන බලශක්තිය වැඩි කරන්න. අපි කියන්නේ මේ අවස්ථාව අපි කියන්නේ ගරු ජනාධිපතිතුමා විසින් දුන්නා දෙ ප්‍රතිඥාව ක්‍රියාත්මක කරන්න නම් අපි තමයි ඒකේ නියමෝ වෙන්නේ. අපි තමයි මේක නියාමනයක අපි තමයි ව්‍යාපෘති කරන්නේ. ඒකින්ද මේ කියන මූල්‍ය නොගවීම සහ අඩපණ කිරීම මත කවදාත් මේ COP27 ගිවිසුමේ දුන්න ප්‍රතිඥාව නම් ඉෂ්ට කරන්න සිද්ධ වෙන්නේ නැහැ. මේ ලංකාවේ විදුලි බල මණ්ඩලයෙන් අපිට සල්ලි ගෙවන්නේ නැහැ කියන ප්‍රශ්නෙට මේ කතිකාවත ලඝු කරන්න එපා. මේක ජාතික ප්‍රශ්නයක්. දෙබතුමා කියන දා ඊට පස්සේ මේක කොහෙන්ද පුරවන්නේ? ඒතර ඒකට ගේන්න සල්ලි කොහෙන්ද ගේන්නේ? ඒතර ඒ කියන අපි ජාතිකව අඩාල වීම මත අපේ අනාගතේට මොකද්ද සිද්ධ වෙන්නේ? ඒකින්ද අපි කියන ඔබතුමාව කියන ගැටලුව දිගින් දිගට වේගන යනවා නම් අපිට ආයෝජකයන් විතර දැනට පේන මානේ එහෙම විසඳුමක් නැහැ.
Stay tuned for the stock updates.
IWS Aviation.
Welcome back here with State of Business, and now the stock update. Trading at Colombo Stock Exchange ended on negative notes today. The All-Share Price Index dropped 11.5 points to close at 8,926.56, and the S&P SL 20 dropped 9.21 points to close at 2,798. The turnover was 1.2 billion rupees and over 41 million shares were traded. Up next are Forex rates. And that's all our news today. For these and more, subscribe to our channel on YouTube and follow us on Facebook. Thanks for watching. Bye-bye.